So I am talking a little bit beyond the pelvic floor today. We're going to be talking about the foot. And I think I'm going to do a few episodes like this, talking about different parts of the body and how they relate to the pelvic floor. So specifically today, if you're someone who struggles with plantar fasciitis or bunions or ankle sprains, or even knee pain, we'll change joints a little bit and talk about the knee. These are all things that can be coming from the pelvic floor, or these are issues that could be causing pelvic floor. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, but they do work together. Obviously, our body is all one. Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Desiree Cassell. I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist specializing in women's health, aka pelvic floor. I'm a wife, mom of 3, foodie, lover of all things movement and nature, and I'm super passionate about educating, empowering, and supporting other women like you to find and maintain balance throughout all aspects of their lives, without pain, pressure, or peeing their pants. And this is the Balanced Momtality Podcast, where we will talk about all things pelvic floor, your core, and optimizing your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum recovery, providing you with the knowledge and tools so that you can feel like the strong, playful, and happy mom that you and your family deserve. Now let's get you out of those pads and back to loving movement. Fill up your water, pop in those AirPods, roll out your mat, and let's connect. Before we start today's episode, just a quick disclaimer that anything mentioned in this podcast is not meant to treat or diagnose any medical conditions. If you have any questions or concerns about your healthcare needs, please seek the care of your medical provider. This is also a safe space where we will be talking about very sensitive but important topics, such as issues with peeing and pooping, relationships, and even sex. So if you have littles around, probably a good idea to pop those AirPods in. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. How are we already in mid-July? I don't even know. This summer is flying by. Unfortunately, my kids do start school in early August, and I'm not exactly sure when this episode is coming out because I am batching episodes so that I don't have to think about it when I'm on vacation and so that you guys don't have to miss a week of information. So if you're showing up, I'm so thankful for you. Thank you for listening to my podcast. This really is here for you. So if you have any topics that you would like me to talk about, go over to the Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support group. It is free and private. Let me know there. This is here for you. But with that being said, this week's episode I just needed to do because this is here for you. This isn't something anyone has requested, but it's something you guys all need to understand. So I am talking a little bit beyond the pelvic floor today. We're going to be talking about the foot. And I think I'm going to do a few episodes like this, talking about different parts of the body and how they relate to the pelvic floor. So specifically today, if you're someone who struggles with plantar fasciitis or bunions or ankle sprains, or even knee pain, we'll change joints a little bit and talk about the knee. These are all things that can be coming from the pelvic floor, or these are issues that could be causing pelvic floor. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, but they do work together. Obviously, our body is all one. And there's this thing we call the kinetic chain, which is really just the movement chain in our body. And when we think about the pelvis and the pelvic floor, it is a muscle holding on to a lot of those pelvic bones that create stability for our core. It's the base and the foundation of everything else, right? Our hips and our legs and our feet come down from that space. Our neck and head come off above, and so do our shoulders and arms. All of these other extremities, right? Our arms and legs won't function correctly if our pelvic floor isn't functioning correctly. And our pelvic floor won't function correctly if especially our feet aren't functioning correctly. So stay tuned for today's episode because I am really diving in to a few of those things that you need to just be paying attention to when it comes to foot health, especially if you do have some of those pelvic floor symptoms like leaking on impact or even leaking at any time, prolapse, pain. All of these things can be really driven and affected by our feet. So let's just dive in. If we think about the foot is a very complex system, really. It's got so many different bones, so many different joints, and it's there to move, right? Like our foot has so many joints in it because it needs to move. And this is why I hate shoes because shoes really do just block the foot together and it makes it seem like it's supposed to just be this board that just flops on the floor and pushes you off. And that just shuts off so much of the natural foot intrinsic movement abilities and shock absorbing abilities that it's supposed to have naturally. So I see so many problems in people's feet. They'll come to me for leaking or prolapse, but I'm looking at their feet every single time. And here's why. If we simply just think about the fact that our foot is what hits the floor, it's transferring forces. As soon as that foot hits the floor, those forces are going up the chain. So how well does your foot absorb those forces? Because if it's a very rigid foot and your muscles aren't absorbing that shock and your joints aren't absorbing that shock as soon as your foot lands, especially during things like running or jumping, which is a high impact landing force on that foot, those forces will go directly up to the knee and up to the hip and the pelvic floor. And that will cause a lot of extra stress and pressure on those other joints, knees, hips, pelvic floor, spine, neck, all of those things. It is directly related and connected, obviously, to our feet. So when it comes to pelvic floor and our feet, we need to have specific things in place for them to be working correctly. We need to make sure the ankle has the range of motion it's supposed to have. So ideally, you're having 15 degrees of dorsiflexion. And dorsiflexion is that range of motion when you're bringing your toes to your nose, right? So think of this position as like a calf stretch. We are in that calf stretch position, toes to nose. You need 10 to 15 degrees. And really 15 because we need to be able to do stairs correctly and we need 15 degrees to do stairs. So we need to make sure that that dorsiflexion range is there. But the other range of motion that really gets forgotten about is big toe range of motion. So that big toe also needs to be able to extend and be flexible enough to extend for your gait to be correct, one, but also so that forces can get transferred correctly up into your pelvic floor. So we look at ankle range of motion. I look at big toe range of motion, especially if you're someone that has bunions. This is something that, I hear, oh, it's genetic. My aunt, my mom, my grandma, they all have bunions. Okay, I get it. But no, your bunions are not really genetic. So let's stop saying that. The only thing that makes them genetic, two things. The reason why we say it's kind of genetic. One is just kind of the obvious one of your mom, your grandma, everyone in your family is probably living a similar lifestyle and maybe wearing similar shoes. So you're getting similar effects on your feet. However, that's not genetic. That's just lifestyle, right? But this can be kind of confused with genetic or being passed down from generation to generation when really it's just you guys are all wearing the same things, doing the same things. But the only other true genetic piece that can play a role in bunions and foot pain really is having joint laxity. So if your soft tissue, that connective tissue is very flexible and hypermobile, you sprain your ankles all the time, you have what people might call double joints, you're really flexible in a creepy way, your elbows extend too far, your knees hyperextend, your thumb extends way farther than it should. These are all signs of hypermobility. And if it gets, there's certain genetic things like Ehlers-Danlos, which is a genetic factor for significant hypermobility in the system. And this is a real thing we want to take into account. But if you don't have Ehlers-Danlos, or you feel like you're not someone that's super hypermobile, then, the bunions, it's just not a genetic thing. Because what's happening with bunions is it's mostly shoes. It's the tight shoes that you're putting on your feet. They're squishing your toe and forcing those joints to come out. And then the rubbing on the shoe is causing more pressure on the bone. So the bone starts to build up. And it just is this cycle, right? We're getting tight shoes and rubbing. And it's super, super terrible for foot health, knee health, pelvic floor health, all the things, because it's going to affect how you walk. And we really want to make sure you have a heel toe pattern. So you're landing on that heel and rolling directly over that big and first and second toe. That line of trajectory of your weight should roll through that first and second toe. It should not roll through the inside of your big toe for sure. And this is usually where bunions come in. So making sure that gait is really where it needs to be in terms of your pattern, heel toe, is important. But beyond that, we also really need to look at how is that foot loading your weight? Is it actually adjusting and accepting that pressure and force with control? Or is it just falling down? Maybe you feel like you have fallen arches and you have no arch support and no strength, and your foot might actually be really flexible and mobile because it doesn't have the strength and support to hold and support your body and your arch, and therefore your knees and your legs. But it's a shared system. So while the foot does hold the arch up and help absorb shock by letting that foot slowly collapse in a controlled way, it's also up to the glutes and the hip muscles to help create the torque in the leg so that the alignment is there and the arch is already there, and the muscles just have to kind of hold it and stabilize it. And this is why it is a whole kinetic chain. We need to be looking at the whole system and not just your pelvic floor. So if you are seeing a pelvic floor therapist, or really any physical therapist, they better be looking at the whole body. If they are just looking at your pelvic floor and doing internal pelvic floor work and exercises for your pelvic floor, but they're not looking at your knees, they're not looking at your thoracic spine or even your neck and your posture above and below and your feet down below, they are missing something. Because if we think about landing, especially with running or jumping, that foot needs to be able to absorb that shock, but with enough strength that it doesn't just let that foot collapse. So we need to have a flexible foot. And this also means we need to have the mobility in our foot to move. And this is why I hate shoes, because most of them are so stiff. They just block that foot together, and it takes away the natural support of the foot. So the foot muscles start to weaken. You start to get pain when you're not in your shoes, because now those muscles don't really know how to support the joints, especially through that loading phase when you're putting weight on it, and it might just be collapsing on you and causing even joint pain, plantar fasciitis, because it's being overstretched because you don't have the strength and support in those muscles. And so we need to make sure that that foot is both mobile but also stable. And so I'm a big fan of being barefoot. However, I have to say, you cannot just go from wearing shoes all the time, especially restrictive, pretty tight, stiff shoes, to being barefoot all the time. You will cause foot pain and you will have issues. You might cause plantar fasciitis, which is just a fancy word for irritation to that plantar fascia, which is a connective tissue sheath that connects from your heel up to the balls of your feet. But we need to make sure that that is strong and that the foot is strong, but also mobile. So being barefoot is so great because it allows your foot the room to move around. And so if you're someone who has been in shoes a lot, just start slowly. Start with a little bit of barefoot time every day. Start to look at what that tolerance is, because we definitely don't want to push you into a state of causing some plantar fasciitis and inflammation and issues that can make that set you back. We're really trying to build resiliency in the foot. And so practicing things like standing on one foot, getting balance by just standing on one foot, especially barefoot. And I want you to think of those yoga toes, like monkey toes. You want to really widen those toes when you're barefoot so that you can have more control and grounding into the floor. And that widening of the toes also widens the tarsal rays, those bones in your feet, so that the tiny little muscles in between those bones can function for you, because shoes, again, limit all of that mobility. So the little muscles inside between those bones shut off. They just get really tight. They don't know how to work anymore. And so then you take your shoes off and you're like, oh, well, Desiree said I need to be barefoot, but those muscles don't know how to work. And then you try and do something and they cramp up on you. And so it is a tolerance thing. We need to see where that boundary is and just start small. Start with a little barefoot time on a soft surface. Don't go straight to hardwood floors or concrete, but just start getting some barefoot time and working on those yoga toes, really getting those toes wide and start to get control of your foot again. I have patients try to do some of these exercises and they just struggle because those muscles are not connected anymore. They're just this stiff, tight space. So no wonder they don't know how to turn on when we ask them to do these exercises. So one of the first things to do is just start to release those muscles. So if you have a massage lacrosse fascial ball, it's like my favorite tool. If you don't have one, I love it. But even, a golf ball can work. It's just a little small and can be a little too pinpoint and uncomfortable. And I feel like a tennis ball is a little too soft. So a lacrosse ball is really what a massage fascial ball feels like. And it's about that same size. It's pretty firm, but you can just roll your foot on this ball and you'll feel tight, tender, uncomfortable spaces that probably feel so good in that pressure. I call it hurts so good, right? It's like, oh, it hurts, but man, it kind of feels good, like it needs it. And that's what we're looking for. Just roll your foot on that ball. You can even roll your foot, especially if you have like plantar fasciitis or pain, roll it on an iced water bottle. Like take a water bottle and freeze it. Especially if you just have like a cheap plastic water bottle, freeze it and then roll your foot on it, because then you're getting a nice icing to the inflamed tissue, but also a massage to help increase circulation and pump out those toxins and inflammatory byproducts. And it opens up those muscles. But take any ball, even have your partner massage your feet. Like there's reasons that there are so much about like foot health and acupressure. Like our feet are really connected into the rest of our body, and we need to make sure they're awake and not tight and shut off. So first things first, just get a ball, start rolling out on it and trying to open everything up. And then try those yoga toes. Once things have relaxed a little bit, you can really think about widening and spreading those toes. They even have fancy toe spreaders. I have some. If you want to get some, you can order some toe spreaders from the Foot Collective. There's a lot of other companies that also have foot spreaders. The Foot Collective is who I have mine through. I really like them. They're silicone and they just really fit the natural curve of my toes. And I'll wear them. I'll wear them in my shoes. I'll wear them around the house for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. There's been times I've walked around in my house most of the day with them and then my feet hurt. I'm like, oh, okay, time to take them off, because it is a tolerance thing. We don't want to push into pain. It's not necessarily more is better, right? So we need to listen to our body, but also start trying to reform and reshape our feet. Because if we think of a baby's foot, like think about how wide and cute those baby feet are. And then they just get to these, like, you think of old people's feet and they're like bunions and they're all twisted and their tiny little toes tucked on top or underneath their other toe and their other toes are curling on top of each other. This is mostly because of footwear. Our footwear is messing up our feet. So make sure that you are choosing footwear that doesn't have a narrow forefoot. So that space around the toes is what we call the forefoot, and it needs to be wide. It needs to allow your foot to have its natural shape. You should be able to do yoga toes in your shoe. If it feels like your shoes are cramming your toes, they're definitely too narrow and not beneficial for your feet. So unfortunately, my Converse wearers, even my Vans wearers, and I am a big fan. I love Chucks and Vans. I still wear them on occasion. I just don't wear them all day. And when I take them off, I make sure to restore my feet by wearing my toe spreaders and doing some of my release work. But I'm also on a mission. I'm about to get my first pair of barefoot shoes, and I'll keep you guys posted because I have a large arch. I have a really big arch, and it does need a little bit of support if I'm doing a ton of walking. However, I have strengthened my feet enough that I can walk in Chaco sandals and be barefoot pretty comfortably all day long. But if I am, if I were to go on an all day hike or go do Disneyland and walk all day, I might put in my orthotics or something just because I do need a little bit of support in my arch. My muscle strength can only get me so far before my arch does need a little bit of extra support. And so having a shoe that has a little bit of support is nice. And the barefoot concept is usually no support. And so I've been looking for the right barefoot shoe. And that's just a little side tangent. I will keep you posted on that. But really when you're looking at shoes, you want to make sure that they have a wide forefoot, but also that they're flexible. So I always go and bend the shoe and try and fold it in half. And if it's super stiff and hard to bend, that's a big no-no for me because that means, those forces are not being absorbed into my foot now. They're going to go up into my back and into my pelvic floor and my knees, and I don't want any of that. That flexibility in the shoe is what's going to allow your foot to absorb that shock and adjust to your movement patterns. So pick a shoe that's somewhat flexible, if not really flexible, and has a nice wide forefoot. So a little side tangent on shoes, but when we're thinking about really restoring our foot, rolling it out on a ball, getting those yoga toes nice and wide, this can all be so helpful. But we also need to have that strength and control in our arch and in our toes. And so a couple of the other little exercises that I like to do with patients, aside from just standing on one foot, because that really is so good for your body. It's a whole body workout, right? Especially if you're really thinking about it and you're not just lifting the foot and wobbling and going, yep, I'm balancing. That's not really intentional. What we really want to do when we're standing on one leg, and again, we're talking about this as if you're barefoot, you want to ground into the floor. So you want to feel that tripod of your foot, your heel, your big first toe, and your little toe, and the balls of those feet grounded into the floor. But that does not mean your toes are curling into the floor, because that's also a sign that your foot and your support isn't working for you very well. The arch support, those muscles aren't working. We don't want curling and clawing into the floor. The toes should stay nice and neutral, but we need to maintain contact with the ball of the first and fifth toe and our heel. So that's what we call the tripod of the foot. And so then from there, we need to create that arch. So engaging your glute a little bit, it brings your knee in alignment. It provides that stability for your pelvis and the lower leg. And it does create a little bit of that arch. So then those arch muscles can hold you there. So you're going to turn on the arch muscles in your foot and try and lock in that position that your glutes created. And then you're engaging your core here as well, and you're just holding it. Maybe you're standing in line at the store. If you see me at the store, I do this pretty regularly. Or in class when I'm doing something at the gym even that's like stretching my arms, I'll stand on one foot. Because just being on one foot obviously helps with your balance, which is something we start to lose. If you don't use it, you lose it, just like strength. But it also helps to improve stability in the pelvis and in the foot, and it helps with control in the core and core strengthening. So it is a great activity just to do, and we can do it a lot of different places, right? Now, this isn't to say to go get in some unsafe situation and balance on one foot. I don't want you to be unsafe, but just start playing around with your balance. So standing on one leg and balancing can be super helpful. We're going to get those toes nice and wide, get that arch engaged, get the glutes locked in, and feel nice and stable while we're there. But beyond that, what can you create your arch in your foot? Like that's actually, I would say, the first step, right? Like if you go to do that single leg stance and you're like, I have no idea what she means about engaging my arch, I can't even get any movement in my foot, then doing it in standing is probably not the best position for you. So start sitting and see if you can engage your arch. And what this should look like is that you are still keeping that contact of your tripod on the floor, but the arch should shorten. So the distance between that big toe, ball of the big toe and your heel should shorten a little bit, and you should see a little arch created in your foot. This is something that I have seen come back to life even in people in their 70s and 80s with completely fallen arches. We can create more of an arch by just engaging those muscles and turning them on again. They've been so shut off from your shoes, so let's give them some time. Don't get too frustrated. Roll them out on a ball first so that they're a little more awake and loosened up, and then try and see, can you shorten that arch? We call it short arch. It's a short arch exercise. You're trying to shorten the distance between that ball of big toe and your heel while keeping the whole foot still on the floor. So getting that arch to engage is so crucial. But in that single leg stance with that arch engaged, now beyond that and beyond single leg stance, do you have control in your toes? So this is also kind of like, I call it more like a yoga toe exercise. And it's not so much widening the toes to look like monkey toes, but instead you're going to have your foot, and yes, I do usually widen them to start, but just get your foot flat on the floor and see, can you keep your toes on the floor, but lift your big toe while keeping the ball of the big toe also still on the floor? Now, lower the big toe, try to lift the toes. Can you lift the toes while keeping the big toe on the floor? And yes, the balls of the feet and the heel all should still be planted on the floor. So this is an exercise that's really going to help give you coordination and give those muscles a sense of control so that they don't just lock up on you. And that's really why things tighten up. They don't feel like they have control or strength to do what they need to do, so they just lock up. They're like, well, if I can't move this with control, I'm just going to lock it up so something's holding this where it needs to be. And that can just wreak havoc on the foot when everything is super tight. So I know I rambled all over the place with foot health and all the things you can do for it, but I just hope this episode gets you thinking a little bit about that connection, because you might not have even realized that the foot pain you've been having is correlated to that pelvic floor pain, and that your pelvic floor therapist can and should be helping you with this. And so just a recap of things that you can start doing and start looking at with your foot is, first, range of motion. Does your ankle have good range of motion? Does your toe, big toe specifically, have good range of motion? If not, or if you're unsure, just start doing a calf stretch, especially for that ankle. One of my favorite ways to do this calf stretch is you roll up an old towel, you sit it by your bathroom door, by the bathroom sink, and you prop both feet on it. So the balls of both feet are on that towel, both feet are pointing straight, your knees are straight, they're not bent, and you're just standing at that bathroom sink while you're brushing your teeth, washing your face. Ideally, this is about 5 minutes, so you want to make sure it's not too intense of a stretch. If it is, unroll the towel a little bit, or after a minute, if you barely feel it, you can lean into it a little bit. But we do want to hang out there for about 5 minutes, and I know that's kind of a long time. So I like to tag it on to something you're already doing, like brushing your teeth and washing your face. So just start getting in a calf stretch. Roll out your foot on a ball and see how it feels. If it's tender or painful, then I would do it pretty regularly. And then when you're done rolling out the foot, try and see, can you widen those toes and make it look like a baby foot and like monkey toes? Like my patients go, man, you have monkey feet. Because I do. I just widen those toes, and I do have long gangly toes. So that's part of it. But making sure you have that flexibility of widening that foot and getting those toes to widen, and also the control. So keep the big toe down, lift the little toes. Keep the little toes down, lift the big toes. Can you do it? Is it hard? Does it cause cramping in your foot or lower leg? Then practice some balance. Stand on one foot. You can even do things like kicking a soccer ball on one foot, pass a ball on one foot, move your arms, hold a weight, pass a weight back and forth, and your hands side to side. That's a great balance exercise. There are so many good balance exercises, and we do get a lot more specific, especially if you're an athlete and you're looking for specific ankle exercises to correlate to that. Or if you're just looking to reduce your fall risk, there can be so many good exercises out there. So I just want you to see that connection and the correlation between pelvic floor issues and foot health, because one thing I didn't mention, and I think this is so neat, even the position of your ankle changes how your pelvic floor engages. So a study that came out, I don't know, it was probably like 5, maybe even 10 years ago already. Oh, geez. But it was really cool because what it showed is that if you are in a position like the calf stretch, your pelvic floor turns on more. Whereas if you're in a position opposite, what we call plantar flexion, and this would be the position of like a high heel, which is another reason why high heels are terrible for your feet, it shuts off your pelvic floor. It's actually harder for your pelvic floor to turn on. So just the position our shoes put our feet in can shut off our pelvic floor and can make it so our muscles aren't really working like they should. So avoiding heels, trying to get a more flat shoe that has a wide forefoot and is nice and bendy is a great place to start. And then start playing around with some of these exercises and get in to see me or in a virtual session if you have any other questions or issues and you want to get out of pain, or you just want to catch something before it even starts, because that's where it's at, guys. It's all about preventive health. We shouldn't be waiting till things pop up. So I'll probably do a whole other episode on why you should be seeing a pelvic PT once a year, because we need to stay on top of these things and be more proactive. And this is where, when I'm looking at my patients and I'm really seeing their pelvic floor issues, I'll look at their feet. I'll ask them if they have any foot issues, and they might say, no, I have no pain. I've never had any pain. But then I'm looking how that foot is landing when they jump and when they're doing jumping jacks. What is their range of motion? How are their joints moving and being flexible for them? And I usually find issues. So that's an instance where I caught something. We're restoring that foot health before they ever get foot problems. Okay. So just something to think about. And I hope this gets your brain on that just assessment, right? Just checking in and connecting a little bit more with how your foot is showing up for you and how it's showing up for your whole body. So I will probably do more episodes on other parts of the body, but I hope this one got you thinking. I love working with the feet. It just is, it's something that can change everything, right? It's like the base. So the pelvis and the feet are really where that kinetic force gets transferred up into our body, and why we can see so many back issues and neck issues, even just from how our foot isn't landing correctly and forcing forces up our body. So get assessing those shoes, get assessing those feet and that range of motion, and let me know if you need any more help. I hope you're having an amazing summer, and I will see you here next week on the Balanced Momtality Podcast. Well, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. I know you've got so many other important things going on, but I hope it was helpful and you leave here with some tools to help you in your healing journey. And I just want to ask you, if you have found this helpful, to please leave a review on iTunes. Scroll down to the bottom of my podcast page and leave that 5-star review so it can help other women see this information. And also, if you want to be a part of my community of amazing women trying to balance all the things, great tips and insight and sharing stories and just motivating each other along the way, feel free to join my Facebook group, The Balanced Momtality Wellness and Support. I hope to see you here next time on the Balanced Momtality Podcast.